It's no secret that Phase 4 of the MCU was not received very well by general audiences. After Avengers Endgame, Marvel were in a new position where they had to find a way to reinvigorate our interest now that the Infinity Saga, something that had been built up since nearly the early days of the MCU, were over. Unfortunately, I think that overall they have failed to do so. Yes, Spider-Man No Way Home was excellent, and so was Far From Home, but Marvel isn't just Spider-Man. Phase 4 gave us the first MCU film to get a rotten score on Rotten Tomatoes, with Eternals. And it also gave us one of the worst MCU films in Black Widow, a film that only exists to introduce new characters to us and not to provide a satisfactory exit to one of the most iconic and beloved Marvel characters. A lot has been said about Thor Love and Thunder and how it butchered its characters. Thor is one of my favourite MCU characters, and Thor Ragnarok is still one of the best films that the MCU has put out, in my opinion. But Thor Love and Thunder was just a joke. It was a parody and not a good one. I have a video out on Love and Thunder if you want to know some of my more in-depth opinions on the film, but let me just spoil my overall thoughts. I didn't like it. Now, Phase 4 wasn't complete garbage. There was Spider-Man, as I mentioned. Shang-Chi, whilst not an amazing film, was still good and featured some truly great action scenes. I'm glad that the director of Shang-Chi will be directing one of the next Avengers films. Not really sure which one, but he's on it. And Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness may have had major flaws and weak writing, but I still enjoyed it. Again, like with Thor Love and Thunder, I actually do have a review for that film too, although it's a fairly older video, and whilst the audio in this video isn't amazing, it's much better than the microphone that I was using for Doctor Strange. Anyway, point is, Marvel has been on a bit of a downward spiral as of late. If you're wondering why I didn't mention Black Panther, it's because I haven't seen it, which is evidence enough that I'm at least losing interest in Marvel. And then of course we have the awful Disney Plus shows. I still haven't finished Miss Marvel or even started She-Hulk yet. Marvel are in a very bad place right now, and I think a lot of people, myself included, were hoping that Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania would be what gets them out of the hole that they've dug for themselves. I was really excited for this film. I love Paul Rudd, he's just a very likeable guy in real life, and I really like Ant-Man as a character. He was genuinely one of the most interesting and engaging characters in Avengers Endgame, which is no small feat considering how many characters were in that film. And then Marvel released this trailer for the film, which seems really dark and really foreboding, and my excitement went through the roof. The first two Ant-Man films were very low-scale, light-hearted affairs, and neither had really blown people away. This really made me think of Thor and how his first two films were these really dark films that hadn't really blown anyone away either, and then his third film changed the tone of the character completely and ended up becoming one of the best films in the MCU. I was hoping that Ant-Man 3 would be that for Ant-Man. However, instead of going from dark to light, we would have gone from two light films to one really dark one. Unfortunately, Marvel didn't make a dark film for Ant-Man 3, they instead just made an overall light-hearted one, with occasional dark moments. To truly talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, I'm going to need to go into spoilers, so you've been warned. First of all, is this the worst film that the MCU has put out? No. In fact, whilst I am going to talk about this film rather negatively, I don't consider it a bad film. I don't think it's good either, but I don't think it's the worst film in the MCU. It's definitely better than both Ant-Man and the Wasp and Black Widow, which I personally consider to be the MCU's worst. I'd probably also put it above Thor Love and Thunder. Wherever you would rank this film, I think we can all agree that it has problems. The biggest problem with the film is its pacing. This film never takes a second to breathe. There is no weight or stakes to anything that happens in this film, because once one sequence is done, we're already on to the next. This film whizzes by and it feels like nothing really happens. Bill Murray shows up for a nice little cameo, don't really see the point of him being here. I can't even remember his character's name. I know it's kind of like Skylar, but that's about it. In fact, you won't remember most of the characters in this film. This film, I think, tries to get you to care about the people in the quantum realm, although none of them receive any development whatsoever. When the guy with the yellow beam for a face gets killed by Kang, I felt nothing at all. In fact, I kind of wanted Kang to obliterate all of them because it would have been dark and cool and really made this character feel like a Thanos level threat. But alas, Marvel seem to want to do everything in their power to make Kang seem as pathetic as possible, a point I'll return to later. It doesn't help that Cassie is such a weak character in the film. Catherine Newton is not bad in the film at all, it's just that the writing for her character is very weak. Cassie has one defining character trait, and that is she's an activist. There you go. That's all there is to her. And she even has the audacity to call Ant-Man out on the fact he doesn't help some homeless people. He quite rightly responds by saying he saved the entire universe, but for some reason he still ends up losing the argument. I really like Cassie in the first two Ant-Man films, and it's a shame that she's become quite a bland, generic character in this one. At least the film remembers that she actually exists, which is more than can be said for the Wasp. There is a reason why a lot of people refer to this film as Ant-Man 3. Sadly, the Wasp has become the new Hawkeye, a great character from the comics that the films, for some reason, have no idea what to do with. She's always just there. Also, can hair and makeup actually give the Wasp a good hairstyle, please? The same can be said about Hank Pym. Not the hair comment, Michael Douglas has had the same hairstyle his entire life. He came out the room with his hair like this. What I actually mean is that he's not really an important player in the film. Again, a great character from the comics that the film did nothing with. However, none of the characters were as butchered as MODOK. Marvel seemed like they wanted to outdo their previous effort with Taskmaster and Deadpool by making the film counterpart unrecognisable from the one in the comics. The worst part about MODOK is not only is his character nothing like the comic character, who is this surprisingly menacing character, he's nothing like Darren Cross from the first film. Ant-Man was a good film, but a lot of people criticise its villain for being another evil mirror version of the hero. And yeah, Yellow Jacket was not one of the franchise's best villains, but he was at least a villain that the film took seriously. The moment where he turns a guy into a glob of goop is still very memorable, and one of the darkest things I think a villain has done in the MCU. This is a guy who straight up tries to kill our heroes without a second thought. That guy is not the same guy we see in Ant-Man 3. The guy we see in Ant-Man 3 is a joke. Now, the concept of Darren Cross being MODOK is one that could have worked, but only if the film had been darker and taken the character seriously. Darren Cross was a bad guy in Ant-Man, whose hatred for Hank Pym had turned him into a monster. Now, the concept of Darren Cross being MODOK is one that could have worked, but only if the film had been darker and taken the character seriously. Darren Cross was a bad guy in Ant-Man, whose hatred for Hank Pym had turned him into a monster. It would have made a lot of sense for that hatred to fester further, and for this film to showcase him as this unstoppable killing machine. It would have been a good opportunity to show Ant-Man what he had actually done to Yellow Jacket, as Darren's current predicament was all because of Ant-Man. But instead the film decided it would be better if MODOK was just a joke for the rest of us to point and laugh at. Which is a shame because I genuinely think that Corey Stoll gave a good performance as MODOK, despite me not liking the character, and I would have been interested to see what he could have done if he had been given the opportunity to delve into darker material. What else didn't I like? Oh yes, the helmets. The characters constantly keep removing their helmets during these firefights, and I won't deny that a part of me kind of wanted one of them to just catch a stray plasma shot to the face. Also, during the probability storm, hopefully I can find the clip. If I can't find the clip, then I'll put a picture of a cat on the screen. Anyway, why does the giant man fall apart? Because he gets shredded and turns into ribbons like Mr. Fantastic in Doctor Strange. Did I miss something? It's possible I did because the film didn't always hold my interest, and because some people don't know that it's considerate to not talk during a film, the people behind me just wouldn't shut up in the cinema, and this was a pretty empty cinema by the way. There were not many people, and I happened to just have a bunch of talkers behind me. Or maybe it's because the film was too dark. Did anyone else have that problem? It doesn't matter too much, it just kind of bothered me that I didn't really get what was happening in the sequence. To clarify, I get why there were multiple versions of Scott. I just don't understand why the giant man fell apart at the seams. Another thing I didn't like was when Scott storms Kang's castle, or whatever it actually is. Scott is getting shot by all these different lasers and not a single one does any damage to him. Kang is supposed to be a guy with extremely far advanced technology, yet all he does is shoot Scott with a bunch of pea shooters. Again, this just really lowered the stakes of the scene because there was no way that Scott was ever in any danger. There has been a lot of praise for both Michelle Pfeiffer and Jonathan Majors. Janet, for the first time, actually felt like a real character. There was always urgency to everything that she did, and Michelle Pfeiffer's performance really did a great job of hyping up the severity of both the Quantum Realm and of Kang, even when both ended up falling short for me. I know almost as much about the Quantum Realm as I did before I watched the film. Fortunately, Jonathan Majors was in this film to deliver an excellent performance as Kang. It's already pretty clear that audiences are taking to Jonathan Majors as Kang, and he has already cemented himself as one of the better Marvel villains. However, and here's why I say something controversial, I really don't like Kang, and whilst I like Jonathan Majors as Kang in this film, I don't like his other performances as the character. In Loki, he was a bit much for me personally, and in the post-credit scene with all the different Kangs, I just couldn't take him seriously. Especially the one Kang who's talking like he's struggling to breathe. I really hope that the Kang from this film is the Kang that the Avengers have to face, because there is no way that I'm going to get as attached to any other Kang than the main one from this film. Although the Kang dynasty implies that the bunch of Kangs from the post-credit scene from this film are going to be the Kangs that the Avengers have to face. Either way, I feel like Marvel are really fumbling with Kang. Firstly, having different versions of the character is not going to make us get attached to him. We know this because they already did this with Thanos. The Thanos from Endgame was not the one from Infinity War, and a lot of people prefer the Infinity War character. That will happen with Kang too, but on a much larger scale. Secondly, they have done a terrible job at making Kang seem like a legitimate threat. The version in Ant-Man 3 was a character that his own variants had to exile because of how evil he was. That guy got beaten by ants, and a guy who can't really fight properly. And lastly, I have very little hope that Kang will be any better in Avengers, the Kang Dynasty, because the guy who wrote this film is also writing that one. Hopefully the director will be able to iron out any kinks in the script. Because of the reception to Phase 4 and Ant-Man 3, there is now a lot of pressure on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 to deliver. Ant-Man 3 may be the final nail in the coffin for a lot of people, but I do hope that Guardians of the Galaxy will be able to revive interest in Marvel and deliver a satisfying conclusion to some of the best characters in the series. Speaking generously, Ant-Man 3 is another disappointment for Marvel, and probably won't be the last. They keep pushing the Marvels further and further back. It's crazy how I haven't even mentioned everything wrong with this film, like, why doesn't Kang just let Scott go through the portal first and then follow him through after? Or, just wait until the portal closes and then reopen it later as the good guys have the orb thing that he needed to escape the quantum realm. Why didn't MODOK just leave his mask on all the time so that we didn't have to see his CGI face? Why didn't Kang just shoot Scott when he had the chance? Why didn't he just obliterate all the freedom fighters? Why did MODOK change his mind after Cassie calling him a dick? Why was Bill Murray in this film? I remember that a lot of people were worried that Ant-Man was going to die in this film, and I was even a little worried too. However, you realise very quickly that he's not going to. I've seen some people say that they wish he had died anyway because it would have given the film some stakes. Personally, I'm glad that they didn't kill off Ant-Man. Firstly, because I really like Paul Rudd and I really like Ant-Man. Secondly, if you're going to kill off Ant-Man, it better be in a good film. Although the film should have absolutely had the balls to keep both Ant-Man and the Wasp trapped in the quantum realm, that's just the bare minimum it could have done to have the film have some semblance of consequence. Unfortunately, this is another miss for Marvel. They've had quite a few recently, but hopefully they can get out of this rut, or I may genuinely put Marvel behind me. Well, until the next Spider-Man comes out, of course.